Welcome everyone. Welcome to the new episode of the Myles High Pod. This is Myles Munroe Jr., your host. As you know, on the pod, our goal is always to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist. Always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right? Have a great pod today. First of all, the team is here. The wife is here. Hey, babe.
Oh, I like that for you, the wife.
Today, I wanted to discuss a particular topic, right? And I have a guest on the pod today who I feel has a great story. And it's something that I think all of us experience at some point in some way in our lives. And I just wanted to shed some light on the process of going through these seasons in our life and how we make it on the other end. So the topic for today is how to rebuild. And my guest today is a great friend of mine. I met her a couple of years ago during the COVID period. You know, all of us were stuck in our homes, and I was stuck in my home, and I was tired of looking at the same old type of place that I was in, right? And I was like, yo, I'm itching to do something, right? So I hit up a friend of mine. I was like, yo, I have an idea to do just a little bit of renovation to my place. You know, any interior designer that you could recommend. And he was like, yes, I have this lady who is pretty good at it. He introduced us, and we have been rocking ever since.
Magic. He's my real friend now. We've
become great friends. I want to introduce to the pod Mrs. Lowree Tynes, everyone. Let's clap her up.
Hi, guys. So, yes.
Welcome, Lowree.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Like I said, the topic of today's pod is how to rebuild. But I want to let's start with a little bit of an introduction to you, right? Mm-hmm. So you are Bahamian, born and raised in the Bahamas.
Bahamian. I like to say things twice because I want you to know I real authentically.
That's how you know we real Bahamians, when you say things twice. So if you encounter a Bahamian and they say something like morning or married or that's truly a Bahamian.
Go.
Yeah, but go ahead, just a brief introduction, Lowree. So tell us a bit about yourself.
So I am a wife, a mother of two, and interior designer. And that's me. I've been doing this for about over 17 years. Okay,
before you get to your profession, so you were born in Nassau, Bahamas.
And I've spent my summers, like so many summers, in Long Island. My kids will be spending summers in Long Island as well.
So you have family. So Long Island is, for those international listeners, Long Island is one of our outer islands. Nassau is the capital, or New Providence is the capital of the Bahamas. But Long Island is one of our other islands. So Lowree lives in Nassau, or grew up in Nassau, but spent a lot of her time on Long Island as well.
Long Island is very rural, so we still have wells, and some homes don't have running water. So you know, and so it's authentically the island experience.
Sure. Well, what do you prefer? You prefer Nassau or you prefer Long Island?
I like the opportunity to go back and forth. You know what I mean? I think it's the ultimate. What's that word that we use a lot now lately? Off the grid.
Okay.
I think Long Island is considered the original off the grid mood. Yeah, okay. I love it.
All right. So you're moving on to your profession. Officially, you're an interior designer. That's what you usually say. Yeah. So how did you get into this profession? What inspired you to become an interior designer?
So I was always interested in the arts, and then my dad has a construction company, and so earlier on, like say I was around 5 when I went to my first official site, and I fell in love with watching the building process and understanding how things go in sequence. And so having a background in construction, I didn't necessarily want to focus on the building aspect, but more so the design part of it. And so that's how I got started. I went to art school, and I spent the first 2 years just studying the history of art, painting, and it was a great experience. I can't lie.
Okay, and you work for you have your own company now. Have you always had your own design company?
No, I started my career off at Bahamar.
Okay.
It was still one of the largest hotel properties that we have in the Bahamas, and it was a great experience. I interned in LA for about 6 months with Diana Wong. She's one of the greatest hospitality interior designers in the world, and so I really got a chance to get a good kickstart in my career. And
you grew a fairly successful career into a successful company, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I am proud of it.
Done well for yourself.
Yeah, a little.
So going back to the topic of the day, right? How to rebuild. And the reason why I wanted to bring Lowree on the pod was because she has a very unique experience, right? As a lot of you know, the Bahamas was hit with one of the largest and most devastating storms in our history, a Category 5 hurricane. And the hurricane was called Hurricane Dorian, right? And Lowree was living in Abaco at the time, and I'll let you tell your story. So walk us through your experience with Hurricane Dorian, because I know like a lot of people that had that storm, pass over them. In particular, the islands of Grand Bahama and Abaco, y'all felt the brunt of the storm, right? Us here in Nassau, we had some experiences, but it wasn't as bad as you guys. So just tell us a little bit about it. And again, you were living in Abaco at the time, working in full-time in your profession. You had a great business going, and then you were faced with this storm.
I think it was one of the hardest hits I've ever had to experience, because it wasn't just like we had a hurricane and then we could go back home. It was more so there was a hurricane, we lost our businesses, we lost our home, we lost our vehicles, we lost the content of our home. And then in addition, we lost our schools and community. And then we all had to start over, and it was the force to, come back. And I think when things like that happen, you have to feel it, you have to be in that space, and you have to accept what's happened. And so I took a while to be in my feelings.
Sure. So, and I mean, that's expected. So I want to walk through like different aspects of your life, both personally and professionally, in talking about the effects that the hurricane had on it. So when it comes to your business and the business side of things, the aftermath of Dorian, how did that affect business? So
luckily, I had some clients on board before the hurricane, so their projects were still ongoing, and I actually wanted to quit. Like, I wanted to say, like, okay, I actually gave them other designers that they can work with, and that we could just close out the project, because I just need my time. I may not want to design anymore. I don't feel like if my furniture's in the ocean somewhere that I am able to source furniture for someone else. So I tried, but they wouldn't let me quit. And so that's HLB, the big picture. And then even when we met, I was because we had the hurricane, and 6 months later, COVID happened. And so it was very much like a hit and hit. So when
one right after the other.
Yeah, it was hard.
And so how did it affect your family, right? Because you're married, you have 2 kids. How did the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian affect your marriage and the rest of your family?
Well, we became, I would say, climate migrants. They don't want to use the word migrants, maybe more so climate refugees or replacements. Climate travelers, maybe we could use that term, which is more politically correct. But so we ended up in, I would say, the best place we could. We went back home. So my parents, being that they are humanitarians since I could remember, they've always had people seek rescue in their home. This was a little bit more difficult because this was their family, so it was personal. So, me and Dana and Leighton and Soleil, ended up.
That's your husband and kids?
Yes, right? Danon. And Leighton's here too, so he's very excited.
What's up, Leighton?
And yeah, so it was a very difficult transition. And also for me, it was, I was all in my feelings. So I was very expressing my feelings a lot. And Danon took it a different way, completely different. He held it in. And so we both weren't on the same page. And so it wasn't just that we had the storm happened and then like you just move on. Like our family was going through an aftermath of the storm.
Absolutely.
And we had to not just rebuild a home, but rebuild ourselves. And I think people miss out on the care for kids as well. Like 1 week they were back to school, and the next week we were on another island back with my parents with limited toys. And I say that because my son was very devastated about the toys. And we think about it like, oh, well, we lost our stuff and we were upset. So he's allowed to be upset about his toys,
sure.
You know? And so we came back and we tried to settle in, but it was difficult, you know? And even with school, finding a school for the kids was hard for me because I didn't want to be forced to choose a school because we were relocated. And everybody's like, well, you don't have that privilege. I was like, well, they'll just wait until I make a decision on what school they're going to go to.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, it wasn't about being privileged. We had lost everything. So at least let me have the kids go to a school that I want them to go to. And luckily we were able to settle them in. But I look back at the photos of the kids and their face were like in shock. And people always say, kids are so resilient, they'll bounce back and this thing and the next thing. It's not that simple. The kids need care, otherwise you'll have that childhood trauma later on in your adult life.
It's definitely a traumatic experience, right? You was living in Abaco, another island in the Bahamas. Hurricane hit, you lost your home, all of your possessions, and you had to relocate to Nassau, right? You were in Abaco, living in a home, you and your family, in a comfortable space, right? And then you had to move back to Nassau, and your entire family had to move in with your parents. Like, only could you imagine, you know, the effect it had on, you know, each and every one of your family members, including your parents, having now to adjust with you guys being in the home, right? But how did it affect you personally? Like, what was your personal experience in the aftermath of Dorian?
Well, I guess I could track back. So in 2015, I experienced postpartum depression. And the reason why I feel like it got so bad was I was too afraid to talk about what was happening to me. And so I didn't get help until like 9 months. So for me, when this happened, I didn't want anybody to tell me, shh, don't say nothing. Oh, shh, you don't need to talk about that. Nobody was going to hush me at this point in my life. I was going to express my feelings as I felt it. And it was hard. It was like, I had somebody tell me that 2 weeks later that I don't understand why you're so upset, right? I said, okay, so 2 weeks ago, before the storm, your car got a scratch on it and you were livid. You were upset. You cried about your car getting scratched. But you're looking at me after losing everything that I owned and said, I don't understand why you're so upset. My car was mashed up like paper and had fish swimming in it when I found it. So I think that people lacked empathy, you know, and people who were in the same economical background as me could not really put themselves in that position to say, wow, I lost everything to me. Oh, but this person, you know, they lost this and they lost that. You should be grateful. I never said I wasn't grateful for my life. Honestly, we had the best recovery spot. It was amazing. My mom, look at my son, he's like for real. Like my mom decided that, you know, it would be great for us to wear colorful clothes all the time. So she took us shopping and we only got colorful clothes because she felt like if you were wearing colorful clothes, or wearing something that's nice, you would feel nice. And that was her way of helping, you know. And then we didn't have the warmth for anything. So we were able to recover and heal. And I think that was really important, and I'm really grateful for them. And also my sister as well. And my family in general, they just all came together and like helped us out.
So you had a community, right? You went through this tragic loss, this hurricane experience, you and your family, and having to relocate, but you had some place to go. Your family accepted you, as they should. I mean, it's always good when we could, have family members or even friends who, could assist us during our time of crisis and tragedy and everything. So moving home, and I think you experienced, similar things to what I experienced, right? Because I remember when my parents passed, the day after they passed, that there was this, and I mentioned this in one of my earlier pods, right? We went through this counseling session where they wanted us to, the counselor wanted us to like release my parents, or the reality that my parents had passed. Like I accepted and release it, right? But you never, like in that moment, for me it was the next day, for you it was 2 weeks later, but there's no time limit on the process that it would take for you to rebound and rebuild yourself, right? Because you go through this traumatic experience and people don't understand, right? I always say, like, sometimes the best thing for people to do is just absolutely say nothing.
I agree.
Because they want to help.
I think so.
They want to be there for you, but they really never know what to say. Right. And always end up saying the wrong thing. I
know. I feel so. I think the best thing is to have empathy, because I don't think people even understood how traumatizing that could be on you. They just wanted you to be resilient, and you can't be resilient without processing the grief. It's impossible.
No, absolutely. And I think you said something that kind of, I think, echoes like what I've been saying for a number of episodes on this pod, right? You had postpartum depression after the birth of your child, or during your pregnancy, I should say, and you didn't want to say anything, right? You didn't deal with it until, I think you said 9 months, right?
Yeah, it took me about 9 months before I could even say anything. And my thing is that, and I could be real with y'all, like, Danon's amazing.
Danon's our husband.
Yes.
Shout out to Danon.
We just got married, and I couldn't stop crying. And it didn't make any sense to me. And Leighton's over here right now. He's now 12, and we're both healthy and good. And he didn't experience a depressive mother at all. His version of mother is really awesome.
Positive.
I would like to say, look, he's saying yes too. See?
Yeah. So you experienced that, but I think having went through that, right? You learned a lot about yourself, a lot about how you deal with those type of situations, what to do, what not to do, right? And then coming to the experience of the hurricane and losing the hurricane, something clicked in you. Was like, I'm not going to be quiet about this. I have to talk about this for me, right? And I think that echoes, something that I continue to say on this part, right? Everything that we go through is preparing us for the next phase in our lives, right? So I think that postpartum depression that you went through prepared you for not just the hurricane crisis, but any other crisis that you could experience, right? Because now you've developed a process for yourself, right? Knowing that, okay, I need to talk about it. I need to let people know how I feel and why I feel, even for myself, right? So that you can start the rebuilding process. Right. And I think things like that it almost goes unnoticed, or we take for granted. But we should always recognize like our growth, even how, no matter how small it is, right? With every situation that we go through, we learn something about ourselves.
Right. I definitely.
And we learn how to develop and process things so that we can make it out on the other end, right? So moving now to you've moved back to Nassau. You've lived with your parents for a period of time, and now you have to start thinking about, okay, what happens next, right? Like what do we do now? And I'm sure that was a process for you guys, right?
Yeah.
It's the rebuilding process. So I want to talk about the real rebuilding process. First of all, for your business, how did you get into the mindset of, okay, I just experienced almost total loss, right? But I'm starting now to gain my ground and get a sense of normalcy somehow.
Right.
And I need to get back to work. So how was the process of getting back to work?
So I guess this was just like the perfect client before the storm occurred, because we were working on an accounting firm with office space. And so when the storm happened, we continued to work on their project and develop it. So the client allowed us to stay in their space in one of the offices so that we could rebuild.
Right.
And so they gave us a space to create, which is so meaningful. But again, I spoke about losing everything and putting in all my cash. So being an accountant and auditing firm, it made me wake up to how to address my finances. So we basically rebuild the company, but not just the design aspect, the business structure. And we had people at our disposal to help us with the financial aspect, help us with the accounting aspect, and also have a space for us to create. And it was really, really a good time. And we spent about a year there. And then I was like, okay, we now need our own space, which was very scary for me, because Dana likes this a lot about me now, but I don't rush to spend money as much. I plan it a little bit better. I do run out sometimes, but only, justified or whatever. And then whatever I purchase or invest in, I have to love it. I'm not gonna gather or pick up a lot of things. It has to have some sort of meaning to me, has some sort of version of a value or add value to what my life. And so having that steady space, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful, especially to Mr. Galanis. Oh my God, he's my favorite. He is, because he didn't know who I was, and it was so funny to say it like that, right? Because him and my mom worked together for years, and so when he met me, I continued to work, and then after he had already agreed for me to stay in the space and stuff, he was like, "Why didn't you tell me who your mom was?" I was like, he's like, she's an accountant. You would have, basically figured that I would have known her. I was like, I didn't know you guys were great friends or whatnot. Right. And it was just, they gave us a safe space. Yeah.
So it sounds like you had a community, right? Because you had a network of family and friends that assisted you in this rebuild. You think you could have done it without that community?
No, and then I have some really close friends as well that listen to me talk endlessly and cry for forever. And it was a lot of crying. It was a lot. It was very painful, and I don't want to discard that or push that away. It was a very painful feeling, and I think for a lot of people to see that pain, it's uncomfortable. I realize that now. It's not everybody can handle seeing that level of grief. And it doesn't make them not your friend or your family. It's just, we all have to protect our feelings as well. We can't pour into somebody else more than we have.
And we spoke about partially about rebuilding your business. And I want to come back to that, but let's go to your family, right? Because you went through this devastation, now rebuilding your family to the point where maybe you guys were, where you were prior to the storm, or even in a better place to the storm, right? So how was the rebuilding process for your marriage, your family, and yourself?
I think it's important to have communication. I think that, like I said before, me and Dana experienced the aftermath a bit differently, and trying to be on sync, and we're both in pain. The kids are in pain, and it's hard to comfort someone when you're in that level of hurt, like devastation. Like, so we both had to step out and take care of ourselves, and then also take care of each other.
Right.
So it was, step out is the wrong word. Sorry.
No, I know. I think we know what you mean.
Okay.
We know what you mean.
Because I ain't going nowhere.
No. We know what you mean. It just takes some time out for yourself.
Yeah.
No, we got it.
So, the things that we would have done before, we kind of needed to still do. Like, Dana go hang out with his friends, or I go out and hang out with my friends, or hang out with, my cousins or whatnot. Because I have a really close cousin. I call her my sister, friend, cousin. She's one of the best. She's not my sister, but she's my older sister in my mind. So, spending time with her, my sister, and then some of my close friends, I was able to have my own space and my own security, so that when I am with Dana, I didn't necessarily just express my pain. He got a chance to see the softness. And my biggest fear is seeing women, my biggest fear is being a woman that's hard. So, which means my grandmother, she just passed away last week. And she was the hardest person I've ever met. Strongest person, but hardest person as well. And I love her dearly for all the lessons, but I don't think she's ever been able to be soft. And I don't think women should be hard.
Right.
I think that they should be given grace. And I don't think she was able to have that. Yeah.
So you and your husband, I think, did what a lot of us need to do, right? Especially when we're going through like a tragic experience, work on ourselves, right? Figure out how or what it is that we need to do to get ourselves where we could at least start to, extend ourselves to our loved ones, right? Because I can't imagine, and a lot of people, I think the difficulty that people have is that a lot of people can't relate to the trauma and devastation that a lot of other persons experience, right?
Right. I wanted them to. I was mad that they couldn't. But now that I look back at it, I wouldn't want anybody to feel what we felt. Like, it's like awful. Yeah. So but I did want more understanding in that time.
I think it's one of those who feels it knows it kind of thing, right? Because, in losing my parents, like someone who lost their parents, like I couldn't relate. Like I remember when I was super young, I was in a choir, kids choir, and our choir director, he lost his parents, both of his parents, in a plane crash. It was I can't remember the airline, but it was the airline crash that happened over the Florida Everglades in the 90s. And I just remember the feeling of seeing him depressed, because he was like someone that I looked up to, that I loved, and just him losing his parents, and he was so like devastated, and but even at that age I couldn't relate. And when I lost my parents, like he was the first person that I thought of, because like I was like, wow, this is how he felt, right? And regardless of like how much I love someone or know someone, like unless I'm not saying that it's impossible to be able to relate, but it's hard to be able to relate, right? It's hard to be able to relate to someone losing their home and their business and everything that they owned, or it's hard to relate to someone who lost a loved one unexpectedly, right? And I think the difficulty that we have is we try to force we try to force ourselves to be able to relate. And again, like we just don't say the right things. Like we always put our foot in our mouth. So like now, I always encourage people, like sometimes the best thing to do is to say nothing.
I agree.
Right, just be there. Be like your friends and family, for example. They were just an air for you to talk.
Right, because I remember one time I was with my cousin, and I could talk about it a little bit. So we went back to Abaco 3 days after the storm.
Oh, wow.
We were the first plane to land on the island after the storm. And they refused to have me on the plane, and somehow I convinced the pilot that it would be a good idea to send just at least one woman. Like it might make sense, right? And they were not into it, and so I finally convinced them. And this is how me and my sister work out really well, right? When needed, our team is undeniably like tight. So she stayed in Nassau, and she was like, "Okay, Lowree, I don't need you to panic, but it's gonna be bad, right?" So she stayed in Nassau, and she kept the GPS locations, and everybody called her. Nobody called me. She turned off my phone somehow. Basically, nobody messaged me the entire time I was there. I was only focused on the information she provided to me. So she sent GPS locations to our friends and family so that we can find them and make sure that they are secure at home. Most of them had young kids. And so our goal, Danon and I, Danon does this all the time. I've never done it before. Danon always goes after a storm to help. I've never actually physically gone. I've helped with donations of clothes or sorting out food and all that kind of stuff. I do that version, but this was really personal, so I had to go. And so when we arrived there, that level of shock that my sister was referring to happened. And so I was like, shooks, I don't think I could do this, right? But then it occurred to me that why can't I do it?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I was like, we're already here. This is going to be hard. So I like sucked it up, and I was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. We got to the house, and it was the first time I've ever seen a body without being in the morgue. Ooh, my whole heart, it was painful. So, of course, anybody that experiences that had to get, they gave me a timeout. The guys gave me a timeout. And so Danon put me back in the car. He took the keys to the car. They left me at the airport. So they went and they got different people to come back to the airport, and then Lorette continued to send me, Lorette's my sister, by the way, continued to send me the different GPS locations. I gave the information to the guys, and then they went ahead and got all our friends and family. And for me, I had to take a break, and I did. And I valued the fact that I took my time out. And when I realized that I was going to be sitting at the airport for a while, I ended up trying to figure out how best we could organize the transport of so many people that were at the airport.
Sure.
The airport control was exhausted, and so I ended up sitting in the front with the security and sorting out, mothers, kids, the elderly, the sick, and then men who decided that they wanted to go with their families or wanted to stay to help. And I don't think I would have done something like that in terms of I don't think I would have found the strength if it didn't personally happen to me. You know what I mean? Because I look back at it, I looked at the videos this morning, and I looked back at it, and it was like hundreds, Dana, and it was hundreds, or it was so many people, I don't know, at the airport. Yeah, it was like almost 1,000 people, and I am terrified of public speaking, and I stood up in front of all these people without fail and said, "Look, guys, I went through what you went through, so we're all here to help. We're not trying to delay your process of getting back home, but it's about experiencing things and seeing your strength in your losses." And being that I'm a big crier, I sucked those tears back up so hard, because and I made sure that they got home, because I had a good home to stay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you went through that experience, lost everything, lost your business for a period of time, but now on the other side of that, you're super successful, right?
Oh,
the
look
business,
at this, Myles calling me successful. I feel so good.
Business has bounced back. You've won a number of awards within your industry. You've been in a number of publications as well. So I think you've you've done well in your rebuild, right? In your rebound.
I would say so.
And I wanted to ask you specifically, how were you able to build your business back up, or even better, to what it was before the storm? Like how was the process? How like what steps did you use? What principles did you use? What did you do to rebuild the business?
I took it back to the basics. Basically, in terms of, like I said, working with being in the HLB office, it forced me to start a business structure. Instead of just focusing on the design, I also had to understand how to make money and how to invest money. And the discussion about wealth management and all of these aspects on what do you do when you make money? You know what I mean? And so I didn't want my funds or my money to be invested in the wrong way again. And so we worked on that, and then we also took small steps. I took smaller projects on. I didn't take on anything that was too big that would have cost me to be overwhelmed. And then now I finally do have the big jobs, and I'm able to handle it in a more secured manner. Everybody was rushing, oh, you have to take on these large residential projects or these large developments, and you have to do this and you have to do that. I always say, if Checkers makes $1 and Wild Time makes $1, they both make $1 net profit. Does it matter that Checkers has to make a certain amount more in order to get that $1? Not really. As long as your net profit is what your goal is, that's all that really matters. Sure. So I took a lot of small projects, and I still do to this day, because people appreciate those one-room transformations. Like I had these 2 Jamaican ladies. Oh my God, it was one of my best to date. It was a small kitchen, and they once it was finished and we did the reveal, the lady said, "Oh my goodness, you did." It was her appreciation for what I did. Sure. Was so heartwarming that I tend to realize. It made me realize that design is so much more than, and I've always known this, but it registered again that it's so much more than what you put in the space. It's more so how people live and how they feel in the space.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, right? Because when you're, the way you grew your business is just taking it back to basics, like you said, right? You go back, and I like to say, do the math, right? I break everything down. Like, what do I have? Like, how, what resources do I have access to? What are my expenses, or what do I have? What are my responsibilities? And I differentiate the two and figure out, like, what am I going to live on? And it sounds like that's what you did, just taking it back to basics, right? It isn't a quick process, right? I'm sure it took some time.
It did take time, and I think I'm glad that I took that time, because I think rushing into these larger projects, I would have failed, and I would have failed epically. I also took time to watch what other business and companies. I ask, what was challenging in your business? What would you have done differently if you had a chance to do it differently? And so I've learned from others and their failures, trying to make less mistakes, trying to build my business as the structure that we have in the design. So I'm not rushing to do a rendering. I'm starting from the concept. Sure. I'm starting from the program. I'm understanding what the client's needs are first before I try to push out a design and I miss a step. You have to start from the beginning. You can't miss steps when it comes to creating design.
Right. So go back to basics, and then you learn from others within the industry, or gaining information. I think that's also key. Definitely also key. So, what would you, someone in who is in your position, or maybe will be in your position one day, right? Lost their businesses or encountered a tragic event. What would be your advice to them? What would you say to them, and how they can rebuild and rebound from that situation?
I think it's important for you to take time. I think it's essential to process your grief first. And then I also think that you have the opportunity to start new. So if you, before a tragedy, wasn't doing what you really wanted to do, this is that opportunity for you to start over. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of time, and there will be pain with it, because with pain you have growth. Also try to educate yourself on areas that you feel that you're weak in. Like we talk about postpartum depression. I wouldn't say it's a weakness for me at this point. Going through that made me more strong. And so every time for the past couple of years, I've studied about depression, and I've studied psychology and cognitive skills. I've spent time studying more about what happened to me than I've studied interior design, in order for me to be able to take care of myself. But then if I also recognize when it happens to somebody else, and I am the one that's going to call it out, and I don't feel bad about it, because if I could prevent something happening to somebody that's close to me, then I don't care if you're mad at me.
No, for sure. Each one teach one, right?
Yeah.
That's the principle in that. No, I think that's great advice, Lowree. And I think each of us, if you don't think you're going to go through a similar situation, or you don't think you're going to experience something tragic in your life, I think you're being naive, right? And the purpose of this is I didn't want you to just hear it from me, and the things that I've said or the recommendations I've made, but hear from someone else who has been through not the same situation, but something similar, and has made it out on the other end. Like I said, Lowree has been able to rebuild into a very successful business. Her and her husband are doing very, very well.
Thank you for the blessings. Speak it. Continue to speak it. I cannot wait for everybody to see what we have in store this year.
No,
it has
sure.
been our best year yet.
And that's great, right? That's great, coming off losing everything to the best year you've ever had.
And now I can appreciate it as well. I think I was, earlier on, everybody was like, you got to appreciate what you have. You have to appreciate what you have. It wasn't that I wasn't grateful. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate what I had, but the loss was valid. And people need to feel like they have validation to have the feelings that they have.
Sure.
And I have a whole lot of feelings, so I needed to let it go.
Nah, that's great. That's great. I'm super happy for you, Lowree. I'm really glad to know where you came from, and the experience that you had to where you are now, and the experiences that you're having, and your happiness. You can see it. It's all over your face and your family's faces. I'm super happy for you guys, man, and I appreciate you coming on and telling a little bit about your story. But let's do some plugging. Let the folks know how they can get in contact with you if they want some interior designing, or just to figure out how they can take advantage of the services that you offer.
So we have an office. It's in Sandyport, 212 Lagoon Court. And you can find us on Instagram. I have been quite honest on my thread about the process of interior design and what we do on a daily basis. So that's LT_design_studio. I also have TikTok. You can find me on TikTok. It's quite funny, not the other versions, but the showing interior design. And then Facebook, and then my website is LowreeTynesDesign.com, and our office phone number is 421-3326.
All right, so all of our Bahamian listeners, and if you're international, maybe you want to invest in the Bahamas and find a vacation home here, Lowree is the person if you need to deck it out. Okay, so we're going to put all of her information somewhere here in the middle of the screen for you guys to contact her. For those of you who are listening, she just told you what it was. So if you need to reach out, please do so. And I promise you won't regret it. Lowree does a very good job. I was pleased with the work that she's done for me so far.
That makes me feel really good.
I'm definitely going to engage her again when I build the house.
We're gonna make some magic happen. I tell you,
sure.
I have plans for that.
That was the wife just now. She's excited.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good to create your family home.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, that brings us to the portion of the pod where we do a milestone, and kind of just wanted to summarize what we've been talking about. Right. The milestone for today is the push you need may not be something that you like, but it's something that is necessary. All right, so you're in a position in life where you feel uncomfortable or you aren't doing enough, right? And sometimes we need that little push, right? We need to be thrown in the fire, right? To figure out how we're going to survive and make it out. And sometimes that's the push that we need. And the push comes in many different ways, right? It comes in tragedy, it comes in crisis, it comes with loss. But that experience builds us and develops us into a stronger, better person. And, we're able to just be better, right? Be more successful, gain a better knowledge of our experiences and how we can empathize and sympathize with others, all right? So look forward to the push, and I just hope that push accelerates you to another promotion in your life, all right? So that brings us to the end of this episode. Lowree, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for being here. My pleasure.
I'm so happy to hear your story. All the best in your future endeavors. And I hope to bring you back on when you get even more successful, right? And we can talk about how you've been able to scale your businesses and 10x your business. All right?
Sounds good to me.
So as you know, as always, the purpose and vision for this pod is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, or any limitations that you may think exist. Always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right? So until next time, you guys stay blessed.